Okay, so good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever it is that you're listening from. You're back on the Think2Thrive podcast, and as always, I'm your host, Adrian. This month or today, I'm very, very, very happy to have with me Donna Kenedy. And Donna is an 8 times best-selling author, a professional speaker, a mentor, a psychologist. She's worked and spoken at companies like Google, Boston Scientific, AIB Bank, along with Bob Proctor, Brian Treacy, Mark Victor Hansen, and Pat Slattery, to name but a few. So Donna has literally spoken at thousands of seminars across the world, and has very graciously given up some time this evening to have a chat with us on the Think2Thrive podcast. Donna, thank you and welcome. How are you?
Thank you so much, Adrian, for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Good to have you. So, tell us, Donna, maybe I give my little introduction to you. You have done a lot, and I was looking.
I think your introduction was perfect, Adrian. Very complimentary. I've done a lot, but for me, it's about living fully, and that's everything I stand by. Is about juicing life, and no matter what the opportunity, the possibility, it's to grab it and juice it for everything that it's worth. Just to live fully, value your time with the people who matter, doing the things that you love. So that said, I've done a lot with the people that I love.
I suppose we'll get into it in more depth as the conversation goes through, but I always like to start off with some easy questions for people, and I suppose the easiest question is to tell us a little bit about what life was like for young Donna when you were growing up. I know you grew up in Mayo, but I'm not entirely sure what part of Mayo, and so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up in the west of Ireland in Mayo, in Westport, actually. A beautiful part of the country, and I was born into a wonderful family. We're all very close, and there's 7 of us, and I have 2 wonderful parents. My mum has passed away since, but fantastic parents, fantastic family. I went to regular school, had friends, did everything that little girls do. At one point, I think I had a pet snail for about a week. Things changed then when I was 7. But up to that point, things were pretty good.
Okay. What changed at 7?
So when I was 7, somebody came to our home. I was raped. And obviously that is a very big thing for a 7-year-old to deal with. And I tried to process it as best I could. But obviously we don't come into the world with tools for certain things. So given that I couldn't process it, given that I kept it for the most part to myself, I had to deal with it somehow. And this is like anybody who deals with any kind of traumatic experience or event in their lives or situations, they'll do the best with the tools that they have at the time. Yeah. So for me, I became very withdrawn, my confidence, which I would have had as a tiny little kid, soon dwindled. I became very quiet. I was very sporty. So I put a lot of my energy into sports, and I was very good at school. So again, my energy went into focusing on those things. And then when I was about 12, then I was being bullied a bit at school, because obviously I was the easy vulnerable target. So I was being bullied. And when I went into secondary school, I remember walking home from school one day, and I stopped off at a shop, just a regular store. And there was a rack of magazines, and it was like one of those, those Women's Weekly or Women's Own or one of those kind of magazines. Mm-hmm. And I picked it up, and I don't know what I was doing picking it up, but I did anyway. And there was a piece in it that struck me. And it was a girl, and the reason it struck me was because she looked like a skeleton. And it was like, oh my God, what's going on? Mm. And she spoke about how losing weight felt like she was in control. And I don't know what possessed me, Adrian, but I decided that if I lost 6 pounds, I might feel more in control of my life. Mm-hmm. So I did everything that I could to lose 6 pounds, and I did. And because I was into sport, it was actually quite easy, because I just became more active and more involved in sport. And I soon plummeted very, very quickly. And by the time I was 15, I had gone into a short coma. I was 5 stone, so I'm 5'10" now. So you can, I don't know if this is on video, but you can split me down the middle. It's kind of hard to imagine. And I was very weak. And was very much in a bubble of emotion and shut off from the rest of the world. And when you're in that zone, it's very difficult to see outside of it. You're in an emotional bubble, so logic is not a thing. So when people tell you just eat, yes, logically that would make sense. It was all self-destructive, so there's nothing wrong with me other than I wasn't eating intentionally. So logic and everything people told me to do should have fixed it. But anyone who's been in any situation of emotion knows that when you're emotional, you're hijacked and you don't listen to logic, you don't listen to reason. You're, very much in an impulsive, emotional behavior. So eventually I did recover, thankfully. I'm kind of, I suppose, giving you the fast forward version. And I did recover largely due to my mother and my father. I did get counselling, but for me personally, it didn't help. It made it worse. So my mother actually read a lot of self-development books to me. She used to read them even when I was asleep. She'd read them beside me. And I guess it was going in. I'm friends now with a lot of people who wrote those original self-development books, ironically. So the words were going into my ears before I knew them. And eventually I did, thankfully, and years later, here I am, 35 years later, and I'm very well. In 1998, then I did have a car accident, and I hit my head, and I had a head injury, and that was another chapter in my life that was quite scary. So so that's the earlier part.
Well, car accidents are serious, but they can, as they do, they come out of nowhere. It's no way to plan for it or anything like that. But I can only imagine as a father. I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old daughter. I can't even begin to imagine what it was like for you going through that. And I'm not a psychologist. I know you are a psychologist, but the idea of having something that you're in control of, there's so many things, especially at certain ages. That's what I always think it is that if I go back to when I was in national school, I was overweight in national school. So I was probably the opposite, and I was bullied because of the fact that I was overweight. So for me, I used to think, okay, of the same thing, I can control my food. If I lose some weight, then people will like me more. I'll be more accepted or whatever. So relatively similar in some ways, but it's to the point whereby I had a stack of uneaten lunches at the back of the filing cabinet in the office at home that my mother discovered one day, with probably about a month or 2 months worth of lunches stuck there. But it was very much the I can't control all of this other stuff that's going on, but I can control this. As you grew up and you became a psychologist, then later on in life, was that one of the driving factors to it, to try and help other people overcome the stuff?
It was actually. It's funny. I started studying psychology in college. I'd actually, as I said, I recovered from the anorexia side. I was doing very well. I was top of my class in psychology. At that point, then I was 19. I was going out. I was doing all the regular stuff that you do in first year in college. And I had my life together, and I was pretty happy, and things were going well. But sometimes, look, as can happen, you get up and something else knocks you down. And I did, as I said, I had a car accident. I hit my head, and they didn't know. I started to experience symptoms, but they didn't know what those were. Neither did I. I was losing track of time. I was hearing mumbles in my head. This is about 2 weeks afterwards. And I just felt like my head felt like it was swelling and things like that. And I said to my mom, there's something wrong. And she said, I know there is. And of course, when you say you're hearing things in your head, obviously there's a few concerns. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor that was on, she was actually a locum. So she wasn't fully familiar with my history. But she did see my file, and she just said, look, maybe you're depressed, maybe, from when you were younger, maybe it's the anorexia, maybe it's this and the other. And I said, well, actually, I said, I'm not depressed. And I genuinely, Adrian, I was not depressed at that time. I had really got my life together, and I had done a lot of work to get my life together and into college. So long story short, I went up for a psychiatric assessment, and I spent 10 to 15 minutes with the psychiatrist in her office alone. And then my parents spent in around the same. And I was sitting in a waiting room while my parents went in a psychiatric hospital. And this lady came over to me. She was wearing a green cardigan, and she just, of course, when you're 19 and you're surrounded by people who are rocking back and forward and who've fingers that are full of smoke and yellow, and it's a scary place. So you look on the floor, you don't look up, and you don't look around. So I was just looking down, and this lady came over to me, and I just remember her cardigan. I don't even remember her face, but she poked me in the chest, and she said, once you're in here, you'll always be back. It has a revolving door. And it was quite scary. A couple of minutes later, my mother came out with my father, and my mother looked like she'd been crying. And I genuinely thought, my God, do I have cancer, or, something like in a general hospital sense.
Yeah.
And they said, we're keeping you here, we're admitting you, and you're going on 24-hour supervision. You're going to have to take a sleeping tablet. So within that 24 hours, I was put on 4 medications. One was anti-anxiety, one was antipsychotic, one was a side effect treatment, or to combat side effects of the antipsychotic, and the other then was a sleeping tablet. So within very, very quick time, I looked like that, fish-eye kind of bulging, dribbling person, and I stayed there 3 months, and I was in 24-hour supervision. And yeah, it was if you saw me now and saw me then, we're two very different people. But my parents had used their insurance for, obviously, from when I was younger, and they upgraded their plan. And thankfully, due to a doctor who shall remain nameless, but who I will forever be grateful for, they actually got me into another psychiatric unit, because you have to go from one to the next for a second opinion. And when I went into the second place, it was different, actually. It was a private hospital, but the doctor was much more considerate. The first hospital was, honestly, it was hell, because visiting hours are very, very different to regular hours. They weren't nice. They really weren't. And it was, you would assume when you look at hospitals, I don't know what they're like now, but certainly then, I would liken it to 1950s hadn't changed. They were very much old school, their approach very derogatory, and you were definitely treated as a second-class human, if not like an animal, in my case. So the second hospital was very different. They were very humane and very considerate, and they listened actually to what you had to say, but also what the people around you had to say. So they got my file, all my notes. I still was on this medication, because they don't just take you off it. Yeah. And my parents actually came up, and they interviewed my parents, and basically my dad said, at that stage, I forgot to say, at that stage, I'd been diagnosed with schizophrenia, which I do not have. I never had. But they were speaking to my parents, and my dad was kind of getting a bit, upset at this stage, because obviously, a few months ago, I was very functioning. I was in college. I actually had 2 jobs. And he said, surely this has something to do with the accident. And the psychiatrist at the time said, what accident? So it wasn't in my file. And neither were the scans that they did on my brain. So the scan that was done on my brain actually showed a hematoma on my left temporal lobe, because they did another one. They did EEGs, they put me on sleep deprivation in the new hospital to do tests. And then I stayed there another 2 months, and then I was transferred then to come off the medication, and to be all the tests and everything. And then I was put into the neurological system as opposed to psychiatric system. And bizarrely, and probably unheard of, the psychiatrist at the time actually apologized on behalf of the HSC. And he said, you should never have been here, which he said that verbally to me, not in writing, but at the same time, he said, you should never have been here. And years later, I actually met that same psychiatrist. And ironically, I was hired to speak at the same hospital, to do an event at the same hospital from a patient's point of view, who has gone on to do well. I think they were trying to, make it look like we create heroes or something like that. But that particular psychiatrist was there, and I went up to him and I spoke to him, and I just, I told everybody that actually the fact that he listened to me, and it turned out actually I have epilepsy. It's temporal lobe or complex partial epilepsy.
Oh,
That is
okay.
the official diagnosis.
Yeah,
And I spoke to him, and he said to me, Donna, he said, I was tied by policies and procedures, which is a sad fact. But in many cases, people slip through the cracks because of that reason. So between when I was younger, the events I experienced, the anorexia, the treatment, the things I found that worked, and then recovering, or should I say, even getting back into life and into society, having spent, almost 6 months in a psychiatric unit or two, having, got a diagnosis of epilepsy and learning about what that was, which there are over 100 types, which I didn't realize at the time, and learning about epilepsy and how I can manage it and all that kind of thing. And then it's funny because when you spend a long time in a psychiatric unit, you become institutionalized. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, I've seen people come in and out, and you do become institutionalized. So you actually have to reintegrate yourself into society, which can be a scary thing. And I suppose the only people who would understand that are actually people probably who've been in there. But that's probably why it has a revolving door. People keep going back. It's like people, I suppose, who've been in prison, they tend to return.
Yes, yeah.
And some of that, if you talk to prisoners, they will tell you it's not necessarily they don't want to commit crimes. It's easier or it's safer or it's what they know. Certainly for me, it's not a place I liked. It's certainly not a place I wanted to go back to. But from it, what I found, and it's a very interesting place to be, where you're a patient and a professional at the same time, when you can see a very interesting dynamic. And there wasn't honestly one person in that unit, and I was in a secure unit, which was high risk, for extreme cases, or for people who would have been otherwise in jail, but they were considered psychiatrically insane. But even that, I met the most interesting people, some like off the wall, but not actually. I would say I actually don't think I met one person who hadn't gone through something bad. I didn't meet anybody who was just like that. Not that I knew of anyway, because when you're there, you talk to people, and everyone had a story to share. Some they hadn't told anybody. But because you weren't a threat, you were a patient, they tell you. And the various different things. And what I realized was actually one of the main things was that they weren't heard. A lot of people, if you have something wrong with you and you go into a doctor, you've probably around 7 or 8 minutes. What can you learn about someone in 7 or 8 minutes? Other than we have a list of medications, we have a list of quick fixes that may keep symptoms at bay for a while. And this is across the board. This isn't just, it could be a broken leg. Broken legs are probably easier to see, but it could be anything. When you go into a doctor, you're paying your X amount of money, you expect a solution. So you come out with a prescription, normally in most cases for any type of ailment at all. And you're kind of happy when you get a prescription because it's like, well, now I know what's wrong with me and I go to the chemist and whatever. That's what most people have.
You probably hear that quite a lot, Donna. It's at least what you just said. At least I now know what's wrong with me, because there's people who are in all sorts of sort of physical ailments or whatever, and they go, well, I don't know what's wrong with me. At least if I go to a doctor and the doctor prescribes me something, I know what's wrong with me, and it's like they can put a label on it. We love labels as humans, I think.
To be honest, Adrian, you've actually hit the nail on the head. And I mean, I'm allowed to say this, not from, I can say it from a professional point of view, but I'm saying it from a personal point of view. And I've been in units, so I'm perfectly entitled to say what I'm going to say. And it is definitely controversial, but I know for a fact it's true. And I've been there myself. I think now labels are handed out like sweets. There are labels there that, for example, everyone has ADHD. Everyone has anxiety. Everyone has generalized this anxiety disorder, the personality disorder. They have they have social anxiety. But if you actually were to, rather than the quick, come in, I'll give you a €15 or 15 minute assessment. If you were to actually sit down with those people and look at, okay, maybe ADHD, maybe their mind has become quicker than the classroom, the education system that was designed in years and years and years ago. But their mind, because they're on games all the time, their mind and their brain has become so quick that it no longer fits that system. The system has not been changed. but you're expected to know the same things taught in the same way. So, or maybe the teacher doesn't match the person's learning style. Most people don't know that there's different ways of mentally processing information, visual, kinesthetic, auditory, etc. I'm sure you know that. So if a teacher doesn't match the learning style, that child may have ADHD. If they're bored, you give a child, a video game and you say, look at that for an hour, they'll concentrate. So, we need to be looking at that rather, or even sometimes their diet. Now, that's just an example of ADHD. With anxiety, if you look at people who have, been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, if I was to say, open you up, there's no such thing as an anxiety cell. There are chemical responses, sure, but you have to look, in my opinion, you have to look at why is that chemical response? Why are the chemicals been triggered in the first place? Usually, it's not due to genetics. Usually, it's not due to an illness. The majority of the time, in my experience, I would say 99% of the time, I'll give 1% for a little bit of maybe there's a case I haven't seen yet. It's actually something that's going on that the person doesn't feel able to deal with. So in a lot of cases with social anxiety, it's easier to get a label because you can begin to understand what's happening. But if someone actually sat down and gave time and said, okay, do you have social skills? Probably not. If you've been in your room, for example, during COVID, it's no coincidence that so many people now have been diagnosed with social anxiety because they have forgotten how to socialize. They've forgotten connection to human beings is one of our primary needs. Isolation is a form of torture in some countries.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's why they... Yeah. I was going to say that's why they use it in prisons as well when you put people into a solitary confinement, because
I know that one.
It hurts.
I've seen both sides. But look, there are so many things right now that if common sense was brought into the equation, things, in my opinion, would be a lot different. And sometimes also, if I was to say to somebody, look, let's look at the issue, sometimes people don't even want to. It's because it's my label my label gives me a gain. It means if I am asked out, for example, to a party and I know I can't cope with that, well, maybe all I have to do is say I have social anxiety and then it gets me off the hook. So I don't have to go in there. I don't have to learn how to socialize. I don't have to learn how to have self-belief. It's easier. And especially if I have someone to back me up that a doctor says, well, this is what you have. Now, I'm not saying this is the case in every case, but I'm saying I've seen it in so many cases that then if you give the people the right tools, you teach them about their brain, both physically and on a psychological level. If you teach them how their brain works, if you teach them about self-belief, if you teach them about how our programs are coded in our brain, even things like, how we can create chemical shifts or neurotransmitters, how we can get them to fire differently, neuroplasticity. I mean, why isn't this stuff taught? Is beyond me. But there's an awful lot of things out there that really could easily be sorted out with a little bit of time, a lot of common sense, and maybe not as much cotton wool been padded around people. And I'm allowed to say that for a number of reasons. I'm from the country. I've been in a psychiatric unit and I've been there myself. Plus, I'm on the other side too.
And you're on the other side. So yeah, I obviously anything I say is as a layperson because I've got no qualification to say anything. But I still always
a QBE is qualified by experience. Tell someone you have a QBE; they're very impressed because they've never heard of it. So you have a QBE.
A QBE. I'll use that one now. I certainly will. But yeah, no, I've thought for a long time that labels and people label themselves in a certain way, and then that becomes part of their paradigm, that becomes part of their programming, and then they exhibit results based on the fact that that's how they label themselves. So labels can be very difficult and very tricky to overcome, I suppose, as well. Can I ask a question, Donna, because it's something that popped into my head, and when you said you were in the psychiatric sections and that you had all these medications, what do you remember clearly, or are you in a way that you're able to understand what's going on when you're highly medicated like that, or is it just all a fuzz and you don't really remember it?
Well, I was on 14 in a space of 2 months, which is a lot. So you, depending on what you're on, I mean, you can with any medication, there's going to be side effects. It's as simple as that. Some side effects can be awful. Some aren't barely noticeable. A sleeping tablet, you wake up, very groggy. Your energy, your body feels heavy. When you're on anti-anxiety medication, certainly the one I was on is the same. You can feel, kind of flutter. I'm not sure what happened there. We just got cut off. My internet's all fine.
I don't know what it is, Donna. I really don't. But for as far as I can tell, I've full internet here on my thing, and I don't know, but it's okay because
the question then about when you're on a medication, you can edit. Do you know how to edit?
Yeah, with the magic of editing, I can make it like it never happened.
Okay, so just ask me the same question again about the medication. When I was on the medication, did I feel?
So exactly. So when you're on the medication, you were on quite a lot of medication. Are you clear? Are you able to understand what's going on, or is it all just a fuzz or blur?
Well, in those 2 months, I was on in total 14 medications, and which is a lot. And every medication has different side effects. Okay, so for me, everything from feeling groggy in the morning to feeling very heavy. Sometimes even lifting your feet can feel like you see a lot of psychiatric patients. They have a very heavy step.
Yeah.
I'm sure I stared. I'm sure I definitely dribbled. I can't remember what medication caused that, but I definitely dribbled. I got very puffy in my face. So I can't remember what medication that was. I couldn't even tell you. I could tell you maybe 6 or 7 of them, but I couldn't tell you everything unless I had my file. But yeah, you do feel different for sure. And all my symptoms, bearing in mind, were still there. So I was still having what I now know are seizures. They put down one of the seizures I had, they put down to a side effect of the medication. That medication does not have a seizure side effect. And it has since been taken off the market. 3 of the drugs I was on were taken off the market. So that just tells you. So it was dish them out like Smarties, and you had no choice. If you didn't take it, you were pinned down and it was going down your throat. So that's, they do make you feel very, very different. And that's why when I see somebody, I can tell instantly, no matter what their dosage, if they're on medication or not, I can tell instantly.
Yeah. It's scary, really. I mean, but I don't know. Is it a resource thing in the hospitals or what? That it's easier, as we say, to just say, well, that person is XYZ and we give them that, and that person is ZYA and we give them that. I mean, I really quickly, my father went into the hospital last October, and he was diagnosed with lymphoma, cancer in the lymphoma. But while he was there, he was put on steroids, and he was put on antipsychotics, and he was put on other stuff, which, I mean, my father is 83 now, and he's mentally as clear as he was when he was in his 30s, 40s. But while he was on those medication, and I think it was the steroids in particular that had some sort of an interaction with the other stuff that he was on, he wasn't himself, but
unfortunately that is the case. I think, yes, some of it is resources, some of it is pharmaceutical companies benefit from people being on medications. They're not going to stop that, in my opinion. They're going to just create more of different variations of. We only have so many neurotransmitters in our body, so many chemicals, and therefore there's only you can make a version of, but essentially it's the same chemicals that we can manipulate easily ourselves given the right strategies. So it's unfortunate. I also think that the training, I don't know really that there's many people, for example, normally the medications are actually given by nurses. Not they're prescribed by doctors, but they're given by nurses. And a lot of the nurses, they're just giving them, not out of badness, they're giving them because they've been told to give. This is what this person is to get, and that's it. And they don't question it because they're brought up in a system and in a training that they don't question it. I mean, that's just the thing. It's not that they're incompetent or bad or anything. They just don't. No, that said, the hospital I was in, maybe they were enjoying it. I don't know, but you know, for the most part, nurses are good people. Doctors are, for the most part, are good people. So, but you also have to bear in mind that one person, for example, a doctor, only has a certain amount of time, and they're there that they do care about people. But there's so many people coming through their door, they want to help everybody, but they have a certain, this is, as you said, you know, that you have XYZ symptom and this is what you take. I mean, that's the pharmaceutical companies pushing medications on them all of the time. You know, they come in as sales reps. So, I mean, they're selling the medication. So, you know, there's a lot to be said in that.
Yeah. My uncle, Hans, who lives over in the US, he calls it, in the US, he calls it the sick care system, not the healthcare system. Because that's all they're trying to do is get somebody onto a regime of drugs or medication, and then keep them on it for as long as possible so that they can make as much amount of money. They don't want to fix it.
It's actually quite easy to keep someone on as long as possible because a lot of them are addictive, and that's the truth of it. You've seen many people who have prescription medication who are not within a psychiatric unit, for example, or in many different types of care systems, but they actually become addictive. For a sleeping tablet should never be prescribed in regular cases beyond 7 days, yet people are on them all the time. I mean, there's lots of medications that are temporary. Now, I'm not opposed to medication for temporary measures. For example, if I have a massive headache, I'm going to take a paracetamol if I feel that it's necessary. However, that's going to suppress the symptom. It's not going to treat what's causing the headache. So you can suppress and you can suppress again and continue on that process, but it doesn't cause or doesn't treat what the actual root cause is. So if you look at the root cause, then you're onto a winner. But then, you know, there's no need for medication. A lot of people lose out there financially. So I think it's something that, you know, many people are working on for many, many years. But in the meantime, people like you and I have to make sure that we get to people and try and help them in a way that actually makes them independently able and capable to navigate life, which everybody, in my opinion, everybody is able to do that given the right tools, the right support. And sometimes it's just a matter of education.
Yeah, we're singing the same tune, Donna, because what you said about the root cause, that's what I talk about all the time when it comes to people not happy with the results that they're getting. It's about, okay, well, you can change your actions, and that's going to get you a limited amount of actual results for a limited amount of time. But unless you go to the root cause, you're not going to get permanent results, a permanent change. Look at that. Your story is fascinating, and we could probably spend an hour or 2 hours talking about that. But I'm conscious we want to get a little bit more out of our time together to help inspire other people. One thing I picked up this book earlier on. I read it a little while ago. You might recognize it. Yeah.
Yes, that was one of my first.
Yeah. Fantastic book, by the way. But it says in it that you became an entrepreneur or self-employed at the age of 23.
Yes.
So I'm doing mental maths in my head here, and you're 19 and you had the accident and you're in the hospital and you're going through all of this, and then you become qualified as a psychologist, I presume, and then at the age of 23 you become self-employed or an entrepreneur. How did you have enough time to do all of that? And
I'll tell you, it's actually it's probably the best education I ever had. So when I had the car accident, I was in first year in college. So from that, I lost my place in college, but because I'd worked so hard, and it's not really heard of, they generally don't do it, because in my year, you had to be in the top 26 to get through second year. So I was in the top 26. I got through, and then the accident happened, and obviously they're going to offer your place to somebody else, but they actually didn't. They kept it open for me. So the following year I went back, but I went back into second year, so I didn't have to do it all again, because I'd already done very well in it. So I had another couple of years then, and then I went on and trained in other disciplines as well, and furthered my education. But to be honest with you, Adrian, I had done so many courses and I had such determination after I had that accident that I became a sponge for information. I was as stubborn and as determined as you could get as soon as I found out that, and I suppose it was because when you're told you have something, and in my case, I was told I had schizophrenia amongst many other diagnoses.
What the fuck? I don't understand.
Adrian, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. There's
23, Jesus.
There's gremlins in there somewhere.
My thing is perfectly fine.
I don't know.
So anyway, we'll go back to you were 23.
So you were 20. Yeah.
We're going to great fun editing this age.
It's the most amount of editing I'm going to have to do, Donna, to be fair. Normally,
sorry,
I don't
there's
know.
nothing I can do with cyber queries, unfortunately.
No. Okay, so you were 23 and you had your accident, and 23 you become an entrepreneur. So how did you have enough time to do all of that with all of the college and getting qualified, etc.?
Well, first of all, I had a lot of determination following being given the wrong diagnosis. So when I was given the correct diagnosis and the facts were in paper, black and white in front of me, because I actually didn't believe them originally, I said, I want proof. So they brought up documents with all the symptoms of epilepsy, and it was just tick, 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 tick. I had them all of the particular condition that I have. And I was really angry at first, because I just thought, you've taken away 4 months of my life for nothing, when really, if you were competent, you would have been able to actually sort this out. So from that, they actually kept my place at college, which they normally don't do, but I'd worked really hard for the first year. So I could go straight back into second year. I didn't need to do the first year. You have to be in the top 26, and I was actually top of the top 26. So they allowed me back in, and they were just brilliant and so supportive of me. So they helped me. I learned speed learning at that time. I also studied in NLP. I studied in counselling. I did as many day courses as I could do. I got as many certificates, if you like, as I could get. I became a sponge for knowledge, for learning, for teaching people. And I put my heart and soul into it. And some of that was because I knew I needed to have the qualifications, but some of it, and to be honest with you, the majority of it was, I'm going to show them. I'm not nuts. I'm a confident person here. Yeah. So when I qualified and I continued to learn, I set up my business with no clients. I had no idea where my clients were going to come from. I suppose I was a bit naive, but I was on a mission that I wanted to help people that I had met in that unit, not those particular people, but people like them, that I had met. I mean, I would have a few different types of cases. For me, to help someone be confident, help someone to have self-belief is like a doddle, whereas I would have been dealing with a lot of high-risk clients. So, you know, I guess I was thrown in at the deep end. I had experience from been thrown in with the hardest cases for nearly 6 months. So I could spot behavior very, very quickly. After my first client recommended me to somebody else. And then it just snowballed. And within the year, I had a waiting list of 4 to 5 weeks, and I would have 6 clients a day, 6 days a week. So in year 2, I was opening up another taking somebody else on. But it wasn't because I went to college. That's the truth. Yes, I learned about the brain very much in college. But a lot of it from a practical point of view actually was work with being with people. And I did a lot of voluntary work when I was at college as well. I worked with people with autism and Down syndrome. I worked in a homework club in an underprivileged area. I worked with teenagers. Again, you know, I could do like 3 to 6 month stints, just volunteering work. So I got a really good sense of people. I got a really good ability not to judge people, but I can read people really well. You can put me into a room, anyone can act, I'll see it straight away. I become fine-tuned. And when you have that experience, I guess you get results quicker. Because you know what the fluff is, you know the stuff that really on a practical level, it's neither here nor there. You know, does it work long term? No, then we're not going to use that. And you learn the strategies, and it's like refining and refining and refining until you can say, yeah, look, this is the issue, this is what we need to do, A, B, C, D, and that's we can do it. And you know that it's going to work long term. And that comes, I think, with experience. So yes, I set up my business young. I then decided I was going to get into property. So I wrote my first book, which was on property. It sold 10,000 copies before it went on the shelves. It became a bestseller. And within all that time, I also took a year. Then I decided when I set up my business at 24, I decided to have my bucket list. So I did a massive bucket list. And you know, you see, where did you get all the time? I have as much time as everybody else, but you know, I prioritize certain things. So rather than watching TV, I went and did a parachute jump, or I did like aerobatics, or I did a hot air balloon ride, or I swam with sharks. You know, I took the same time everyone else had, and I just did something with it different, because for many reasons, in some cases I was desperate, and some I was stubborn, and some I was determined, and all of those things drove me to do things full on, but in a shorter amount of time. And that, I guess, is why I value time so much. I take a lot of time wasting out of it. You know, so the things sometimes people do, like people, you know, answer phone calls to people really they don't want to talk to, or people sending emails to really they couldn't be bothered, or you know, things really that if you were given 6 months to live and somebody said, you know, would you do this and this, you say, actually that's a waste of my time. Well, then don't do it, because you might have 6 months to live. And that's
you never know.
I started to live my life. So I crammed everything in, you know, and I'm a very balanced, paced person. So but I also really appreciate everything that I have, and I don't have time to waste. And I think if a lot of people waste a lot of time, and don't get me wrong, I love lying on the couch sometimes doing absolutely nothing. It's wonderful. So I'm not out there all the time and go. I love the simple things in life, but I don't waste time doing things I don't want to do with people I don't want to do them with. You can draw back a lot of time if you become selective.
Very true. And trying to balance that, I suppose, with family life, with being a mother as well, can take up an awful lot of your time as well. So trying to, I suppose, planning. Bob used to always say, you know, the idea of making time for things is it doesn't. It's not true, because everybody has the same amount of hours. It's about your priorities, as you say. You decide, well, is it more important for me to sit down for 2 hours and watch something on Netflix, or to focus on my goal and to focus on what it is that I want to achieve?
Well, last year was a leap year. Could you tell me what you did on the 29th of February? You got an extra 24 hours and you blew it.
Got an extra 24 hours, yeah. I think
Could you tell me what you did?
No, but Pat made a point of that, actually, because we were doing the mentorship at that stage, and he was like, so what are you going to do with the extra 24 hours that you've been gifted? Yeah. And
but your gift is every day.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the key things I learned was, and I think it's really valuable for anybody listening, is that if you have goals, you need to put your values to the front of those goals. And rather than trying to like achieve this and achieve that and be like this person, like that person, and trying to hit the benchmark that you see on social media, you need to put what's important to you. So for me, my family is number one, but I still have all the goals I want to achieve. So then, you know, you have to realize, well, you're going to achieve them, but you're going to have to include your family within them. So you've seen my son Ashton has been to events with us. Like, for example, we did an event in Sweden, and we stayed on a day later, and we went and we did like a theme park, and we did a historical tour of Sweden. So, you know, he wanted to see different things. We've done that quite a few times. You if for certain times we just turn the phone off, or we look at what can we do together, what kind of way can we use our time. So the majority of my work will be done while he's at school. So therefore I have less hours, but I make sure I get more done. Yeah, like you do the same amount of work in a day, whether you spread it out until 6 o'clock or whether you cram it in until 2. That's the reality. I mean, if most people look at their day, a lot of it is spent just talking and doing whatever. But you actually give an hour, like time-wise of work, you probably get it all done realistically, if you be totally honest, probably in 4 hours. So I learned that when I was pregnant with Ashton. And the book you have in your hand, actually, I wrote in the front of my car when Ashton was asleep in the back. No way. And that's how glamorous it was, Adrian. I used to drive down to the beach, and I had my laptop on because he was important to me. And between 11:30 and 12:30, he slept. Mm-hmm. And I would do an hour a day. Mm-hmm. And that's when I'm teaching people to write books. That's why I say you work maximum 40 minutes a day. People have lives.
Yeah.
So you have to, you work around a realistic life.
Well, what do you think of the whole hustle culture, I suppose, that there is out there at the moment, of you got to be, up at 4:30 in the morning, hit the gym, have XYZ done by 7 a.m. and then you hit into your day and you're going right up until the evening time.
I think it's a great show for social media, but it's not realistic. Adrian, if I was to get up at 4:30, okay, look, everybody needs sleep. Women actually need a little bit more sleep than men. If people research sleep, for me to have a really refreshed sleep, it's going to shock you. I need 9 hours. 9 hours of sleep. Yeah. I couldn't survive personally on 4 hours. I just couldn't. I could not go to bed at 12 and get up at 4:30 and be a decent human being. I would be like a gremlin. So I couldn't do it. I get nothing done. Let's be completely honest with you. So I don't actually think that when you get up at 4:30 or 5:30, some people love to do that, like for the sunrise or whatever, but they're generally people who go to bed a lot earlier.
Yes.
So it really did. I mean, you don't see that. So people say, okay, well, they must be getting up at 5:30, they get so much done, but they go to bed earlier. So your body can only handle a certain amount. Also remember, there are filters there. So probably not, 90% of people on social media, you could question whether they look like that in real life or not.
Yeah.
People are going to put up their good photographs. People are going to put up their happy moments. They're not going to put up, if their child has just spewed all over them, unless they're trying to be funny. Most people will show their wonderful child having great manners. So we have to be realistic as well. So I think the whole hustle culture and the super person or superman or superwoman, I think it's a lot of nonsense personally. And that's why I think, look, I don't know how many times when I'm doing a call, even during COVID, my son would come in and say hello to everybody. But that's real life. Of course, you're going to be professional and get what you're meant to be getting done. But if that happens, and many times when I've been mentoring people, their kids have come in behind them or the dog has or whatever, let's create like normal life. We can all get it all done, but certainly not with pressure. And I think it's an awful thing when people put pressure on themselves that much because they're not happy. Really, if you were to ask yourself honestly, or think about anybody, who wants to be busy all of the time? I don't know anyone who does. They want to be seen to be busy all the time. I don't want to be really, really busy all the time. I want time for myself to do whatever it is I want to do. So create a way to do that.
Yeah. But that's it. I mean, if you're so busy doing that, then you're not really living either, and I get that people say that they'll do it for a short period of time in order to reach a goal or to reach an income goal or whatever it is, so that they're then able to relax and do whatever it is that they want to do. So I get that as well, but it you're dead right with the Instagram and the social media thing. I always say to my wife is that you're only seeing the highlight reel. Yeah, you're only seeing the bits that they want you to see. Yeah, not all the crap, as you say, the baby spewing or whatever the case may be.
I've shown it all at times. Of just look what's happened here.
Yeah. And God knows, as a parent, there's enough puke to go around everywhere. So,
but look, there's so many things like that, and just need to embrace them. I think people appreciate it because I think living in a fake world is nonsense. It puts people under pressure, and that's why people have they feel the need for labels because it just can't cope. It's just not normal. I mean, your body is not meant to go into a hyper or hypo state. It's not.
Yeah.
You can only carry pressure for so long. The idea of needing a support is also like, you know, you're somehow weak. Absolutely not. Delegate to people. If you can get someone else to do it, absolutely 100%. You know, and there's put the work in by all means. And when you're working, you put 100% into your work for sure. But you've got to have a balance. And I think, you know, one of the other things that I learned, which 100% I do with every single client of mine, is I will not just check their wants, their goals, and you know, all their desires. I will look at their needs, and are their needs been met at a basic level. And I always liken human beings to like being like a plant. A plant needs water, air, sunlight, soil, etc. But if you take away or give a plant too much or too little of something, you could say, well, it'll die. It won't die first. It'll do everything it can to get its needs met. So if you take away light, it will twist itself towards the sun. If you take away water, it'll plunge its roots down. It'll look completely miserable when it scrunches up its leaves. If you give it too much, it'll wilt. The same as a human. If you give a human too much or too little of something, there's going to be a problem. So first and foremost, balance is key in your life. Like, you can't become one-dimensional. And I think a lot of people have become so fixated on finance and on appearance to the detriment of actually all the other parts. So a lot of people are walking around exhausted, malnourished, not healthy physically, because they're trying to do so much for who? Their families are falling apart. Divorce rates went up 122% in 2021, I think it was, or 22.
Wow.
I did a radio interview. That was because people were living with each other that they realized they didn't like, and they were forced to.
The COVID effect,
their needs weren't met. Now, if you were to reverse that maybe a year before COVID, and for example, if I was to look at a couple and I was to say, are your primary needs met as individuals and as a couple? Chances are they wouldn't have been. And I look at everybody's needs and I think, are they being met? If you've got balance in your life, you've a fantastic grounding. Everything after that is icing. Like, any strategy can be learned. Any goal can be achieved. Someone else has done it before you. It's really, or a version of. But it's the people, I feel, it's the people that are the most balanced are the happiest. And I think we've shifted towards, in my opinion, a little bit too much towards more of a one-dimensional fixation on certain needs as opposed to taking care of everything. There's about, in my opinion, there's about 13 needs that need to be taken care of. And most people don't even take care of 3.
The basics are food, shelter, shelter and security. I just think back because I can remember a little amount from Maslow's lovely hierarchy, and food, shelter, and security are the base needs, isn't it?
That's Abraham Maslow. Yeah, that's his hierarchy of needs. But if you look at like needs today, like you have your basic needs, but also in a very busy world. So things even like a sense of belonging is a need, a sense of community. Having a sense of like having maybe a significant other or a sense of some kind of bond that can even be a bond to a pet, having a sense of control in your life, having attention for yourself to other people, from other people, having independence, having a sense of gratitude, personal growth, spirituality, nutrition, sleep, water. Like there's several needs that need to be met. And of course, then things like finance, leisure, you know, they all need to be looked at. And anytime I graph it for people, and anytime I graph it, it's actually a bit of a shock to people that actually it can be very one or two sided in sections. And they realize actually, with, you know, these other needs, if I take care of them, the ones I'm putting so much pressure on myself will actually be an awful lot easier. Like if someone's getting proper sleep, they're going to be in a position to think more clearly.
Yes.
And therefore they get more stuff done.
Yeah.
But because they're trying to be like doing the hustle thing,
they
have to try harder, and they're making themselves sick in the process.
Yeah, I think as well that there's an awful lot of people out there who look incredibly healthy, so they look super fit, but they're not really healthy on the inside because of all of the focus is just on the exterior between the Botoxes and the lifts, this and whatever.
My eyebrows. There's no Botox. But yes, you're right. You're right. And they've become very fixated on one particular area, which is really, in quotes, success. This kind of standard version of success. And there's so much more to life for a genuine fulfillment and happiness. And I mean, if you look at, I can't remember her name now, but she did a study on people who were in palliative care, and she looked at, there was a nurse, and she looked at the 5 regrets at the end of people's lives. She's documented in a certainly a research paper, possibly a book. Her name's just slipped my mind now, but one of the things that, people had regrets, they were all personal. Nothing was, I wish I was more successful. It was all, I wish I was spent time with the people that I loved. I wish I did things that I value or whatever. Like, they're all personal, and people have forgotten those because they have such a need for, I think, outward validation. In my opinion, the number one struggle and difficulty for human beings is the need to be good enough and to avoid rejection and judgment at all costs. And most of the world's problems come because of that. And if you were to imagine a human like an onion, and you were to take away all the layers of, I do this, I'm doing this is security, this behavior, this symptom, etc., and get down to the core of it, you will find that for the majority of people, it's actually about being good enough and avoiding rejection at all costs.
Being good enough for who?
Being good enough for what they assume other people benchmark good enough as. If people feel that they need, especially, for example, in a lot of men's cases, they feel the need to be the breadwinner, the need to, and I think all men, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all men do like a sense of being able to provide, a sense of status, a sense of achievement and productivity. A lot of women, obviously women do as well, but I think in my experience are kind of it more obvious in male cases, and in women's cases, we're very much about relationships and community and networking and that kind of thing. And we have to consider all of that. But when it comes down to it, people don't like rejection. Like if you really want to hurt someone, you can do it by making sure they feel rejected.
Yeah.
Why do people not like public speaking? They're able to talk under normal circumstances because they prefer, to chew on glass, because they can if you were to take 300 people in a room and you say go up there on stage and talk about something you are absolutely 100% confident in. I got up this morning and I had breakfast, whatever, and you just talk about your breakfast. That's how simple it is. They could do that with one person. They could do it with another person individually. Then they could take another person individually and do it. Zero problems. When they're all in a group, it's like one big judgmental blob.
Yes, yeah.
Their only fear is actually that they'll forget the words. What if they do? What about? If they mess up, if they don't sound good, they're not knowledgeable enough. And what's all that about? Strip it back, and it's about being, will I be accepted? Will I be good enough?
Yeah.
And you look at all the problems that anybody ever has, and you just go, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And pare it back. And it will always come back to that. Always.
So I'm very conscious of time, Donna, and you've been very generous with time, so I don't want to take up too much, but I could talk for hours because I love this. The good enough bit. How, as a parent now, how are you trying to instill in Ashton, for example, the belief in himself that he is good enough, or how could a parent do that for their child so that when they grow up, they don't suffer in the same way that potentially you, I, or our generation did?
Well, I can be very easy and a clear answer on that one. You compliment them on their personality, their attributes, their core values. For example, every single night without fail, I will tell Ashton, I'm so proud of you because you're such a wonderful person. I don't say I'm so proud of you because you're the best person at your basketball team. I say, well done, that's fantastic. Really proud of you if you did your book, really proud, whatever. But I will always put his person first. So no matter what he goes through in life, he's always going to be a wonderful person. If you meet him and you say to him, God, you're so confident, he's like, well, yeah, I know I am. Or you're fantastic. Yeah, I am. And he knows he is. He genuinely, in his entire cells, he knows he is. So would he be upset if he didn't get an A in something, or he doesn't get A's in lots of things anyway, but would he be upset if he, didn't make the team? Of course, he might be disappointed, but he's not going to think his world has shattered because he doesn't end up top of the pile, when he wanted to.
Yes,
and I think it's really important that, and if a parent constantly, if you tell your child anything, just talk to them about them as a person, like you're a really lovely person. Or for example, if they do something kind, that was so kind of you, or that was so nice, or, or you're really interesting, or I love the way you did that picture, it was creative. Tell me about your creativity, or what made you decide to do that, or what got you to think about that. God, you have such a smart brain. That you're talking about them as a person and how you're so proud of them as a person. Then the need to be good enough isn't based on targets. The targets are icing. They're not the core. And I think people have kind of lost that. And that's in adults too.
It is, and in the workplace in a big way. I have another book, Mindset, by Dr. Carol Dweck, which is a fantastic book that I read, and she says very much exactly the same thing as what you were saying. It's you're not praising the outcome so much as you're praising the person, for trying really hard or putting in the effort, that they're a good person, as you say. And whether they achieve the A or they get the place on the team or whatever it is secondary. Whereas I'd say what a lot of us have grown up with is, when you get a good mark, you're told, "Oh, brilliant, good job on the good mark. You're really smart." Yeah. And then that forms the belief within the person that I'm really smart. Okay. And then they come up against something that's more difficult and they can't do it. And then comes in the good enough. I'm not good enough because I thought I was really smart. My parents told me I was really smart, and now I'm not really smart. So if I'm not really smart, who am I? Yeah.
Exactly. Then it comes back to the same thing again. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, Ashton I think he got a 6 today in something for a biology test that he did. And he was absolutely elated that he got a 6. Now, to most other parents be like, well, he didn't get a 10. But why are you so happy? Because I know that particular subject he found difficult, and that particular test he found difficult. And he did brilliant because he put his whole heart and soul into it. And he was absolutely thrilled with himself. Can you imagine if I said, but Ashton, you didn't get a 10?
Yeah.
That is like, it's like stripping him and whipping him. He is absolutely over the moon with himself. And who am I to make a difference?
No, for sure. I just have sort of 2 more questions in my mind, and then we'll call it a day if you still have time. The bit that you said earlier on about what drove you to complete all that you needed to do after you came out of the hospital in order to then create your business, etc., was this, I would call it a burning desire to prove them wrong. Yeah. So this was something on a deep emotional level that was driving you forward in order to make sure that you succeeded, in order to prove people wrong, or to be successful, to achieve. And I know we've spoken about this before, Donna. It's a sort of a common theme that you see in an awful lot of people's stories. The story of somebody who's overcome all odds and has succeeded. For people who are listening, who maybe have had a lovely childhood, haven't had a whole lot of things go wrong with them, but still feel that there's more to life and that they want to try and succeed, but can't find that same sort of a burning desire to push them. What sort of help or recommendation or something that they could focus on would you say?
But they're probably not motivated by what they're trying to achieve.
Okay. Yeah.
If you don't have a burning desire for it, I mean, for me, yes, part of it was I'm going to prove you wrong, but more of it was I'm going to prove myself right and that I wasn't crazy. That's, to be honest, that I'm going to prove my capabilities to myself, actually, bizarrely, but it was to myself, is that to validate myself, actually, yeah, I'm well capable of this, so don't tell me I'm not. A burning desire, I mean, a lot of people talk about that. I don't really know many people who have a burning desire to the level of, maybe you read about Napoleon Hill or things like that. I think if you're interested in something and you create a lot of excitement around it and you enjoy it, the momentum kind of takes care of itself. If you don't enjoy it, realizing that you can change your mind at any time. You're not stuck with something, you know, and not all of the time are you going to be, well, in my experience, not all of the time are you going to be 100% have a burning desire about what you're trying to do. And that's even if you're running a marathon, you're not going to have a burning desire all the way through. You're going to like, I just feel like giving up. I'm so not interested in some of it. And then you pick yourself back up again. So you decide what it is that you want and you commit to it and realize actually along the way I might have hiccups, but what do I do in those moments where I don't have that momentum? What do I do in my moments where I might feel a little bit vulnerable? And if you, I mean, I under no illusion that, you know, there's, my goals, I still have my goals and different things that I want to achieve. And I will always have that because human beings are constantly progressing and growing. But I'm also not stupid. And I realize, could I go back to the way I was? Absolutely, 100%. And anyone ever with a coping mechanism can do it. Everyone has a coping mechanism. So I know, and I know myself so well, that I have things in place that if I ever felt in any way shaky, I know exactly what to implement. And a lot of people haven't become conscious of their vulnerabilities. But when you do, you can create strategies that they actually, yes, they'll be there. Yes, the world might be a negative place at times, but you navigate things a lot easier. So you don't have the pressure on yourself to be perfect or have a burning desire all the time or perfection or, you know, to have it 100%, I have to give it all the time. That I don't know anyone who does that that's healthy. But I think if you're interested in something, you absolutely love what you do and allow for those moments of like, you know, kind of vulnerability, let's say, and recognize them and say, you know, now and again, people need a day off as well. That can be a great reset. And sometimes you can go, actually, you know, today I feel like absolute crap. Great. I'm going to give myself 4 hours and I'm going to feel like absolute horrendous crap within that 4 hours, set my alarm. And at the 4 hours, 1 minute, I stop. That's a good little strategy for people who are just, they find it a struggle. You give yourself moments. And when you manage your moments, then, you know, having that burning desire or whatever your equivalent is not actually that hard. But I think just take the pressure off. We can all have a good time in life. Here to do. We're not here to pressurize. We're here to have a good time.
Yeah, we're here to have a good. Pardon?
And to live life fully. That's what we're here for. To have a good time. We're here to feel good. The whole notion of, you know, we're here to suffer. I bought out of that years ago. I don't want any part of that one.
No,
you know,
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, we were all brought up, I suppose, in you know, the school. We're here to suffer. We're here to do our penance. I've done mine. Thanks very much. I'm enjoying the rest of my life. And unapologetically too. And I think if people live like that, you'd be a lot happier, a lot more fulfilled, and a lot healthier.
That's what it's all about. My uncle has a brilliant saying. I love it. It says his aim in life is to die young, as late in life as possible. So having fulfilled all the things that he wants to do, to enjoy life to its maximum up until that time when it's time to move on.
Absolutely. That's what we should all be doing, and we can do it.
Yeah. Donna, it has been a fantastic chat with you this evening. I've really, really enjoyed it. I, generally speaking, at this stage, I ask people for a book recommendation. It's kind of selfish because I like reading books, and I'm growing my library of books from all the recommendations.
All of mine are great recommendations. I can highly recommend.
Well, I must say I really enjoyed yours, the confidence to succeed. I thought that was really good. Where I suppose the other thing is where can people find you? I know your website is donnakenedy.com. If somebody wants to find out more about you and maybe reach out to you, etc., they can do it in that way. And I'll put that into the details on the recording once we set it live. But if there's anything else that you want to share before we wrap up.
I just think that if anybody really needs to move on in their lives and to focus on living life more fully, is to realize that they're good enough exactly as they are, and just to tap into their uniqueness, their potential, and take the pressure off, and then just go for it. Just go for it. I love it.
Live Donna,
fully.
Live fully.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And just hang on for a second.